Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to begin our increasing section. First we got narrower and narrower, now we get wider and wider. But instead of coming up here as a separate piece, it's going to attach to these stitches with the yarn over and stitch pairs. We're going to attach it to those, so it's going to close up into an actual heel shape. And if you don't believe me, you'll see that that actually happens. So what we're going to do for our first row on the right side to start increasing is we're going to do a yarn over and we're going to knit to the first yarn over. Now, we're not going to stop at the beginning of the yarn over and knit to pair, which would be here. See, this is the yarn over and this is the knit pair. So we're not going to stop now. We're going to knit one more. We're going to stop at that actual yarn over. Now we're going to do a knit two together, because what we want to do is close up that gap. So we're going to knit this yarn over together with the next stitch, which was the knit from the next pair. So we're going to knit two together. So that closes up that gap. And now we're going to turn. All right? And now we're going to yarn over and we're going to purl. We're going to do the same thing in this direction. We're going to purl all the way up to the yarn over. Not to the stitch in the pair, but to the yarn over itself, which is the second stitch in the pair. So see, I'm going to purl up to there, and I'm going to keep my eyes open. All right, I'm up to that first pair, so I'm going to purl that first part of it. Okay? Now here's a really tricky thing. We're going to do a slip, slip, purl instead of purl two together. And because that is a left slanting decrease, and in this particular heel, it looks nicer and tidier on the outside to do a slip slip purl than to do a purl two together. So I'm going to show you how to do that because it's pretty tricky. So when we slip slip purl, the first thing we're going to do is going to slip two stitches one at a time knitwise, because we want to turn them around on the needle. So we're going to slip one knitwise and we're going to slip another knitwise. And then we put those stitches back onto the left hand needle. Now, we're going to do a purl two together through the back loop. So I bring my working yarn to the front. It doesn't matter if you carry your yarn in the right hand or your left hand. It's the same concept. I'm just carrying my yarn in my left hand because that's how I learned how to do it from my grandmother, and because I can't really do a purl two together through the back loop with the yarn in my right hand. I'm not good enough at knitting with my right hand to show you that. But conceptually, it's the same thing. You're going to bring the needle, normally to purl two together, you come into the stitches this way in the front. But this time we're going to come all the way around to the back and bring the needle in that way. And then we complete it like a regular purl. And we've done a purl two together. And then we're going to turn. So now we're going to do a yarn over. We're still doing yarn overs at the beginning of every row, even though we're making our rows longer and longer now instead of shorter and shorter. And again, we're going to knit all the way across to the first yarn over. And see, here we've got the first pair. So we're going to knit all the way across to the first yarn over. Now we're going to start to see that we're going to have two yarn overs together, because we've got yarn overs that we made earlier when we were getting shorter and shorter on the rows, and we have the new yarn overs that we're going to make on each row. And so from now on, when we get to the end of that knit row, when we get up to that first yarn over, we'll see that we have two yarn overs and then a stitch. And we're going to knit three together. And we'll be doing that every knit row from now on. So then we turn and we're going to yarn over and we're going to purl across to the first yarn over. So that's our setup rows. So you can see that we just left one stitch unworked at the end of each of those rows. So here we are coming up to the end of that first purl row. Leave the last stitch unworked, turn, and then again we work a regular yarn over and we're going to knit across. Now, just to talk about yarn overs a little bit, when we turn, our yarn's in the back, and for those of you who hold the yarn in your right hand, your yarn's in the back when you turn because you just finished a purl row. So to make a yarn over, you'll have to bring the yarn to the front and then bring it over the top of the needle. And then we're going to be knitting again, so you'll bring it to the back and it comes over the top of the needle and bring it to the back and begin to knit. Now, I'm not very good at knitting with the yarn in my right hand, so I'm only going to do a few stitches that way, but I wanted to show you that because I know that making yarn overs can be a little bit extra tricky when you hold the yarn in your right hand. So we're going to knit all the way across here, or almost all the way across, because with short rows we never knit all the way across. And what happens is we go all the way to the first yarn over and stitch pair. And let's see what that looks like. So you can see here's the unworked stitch, and that's kind of separated by a gap. And then right after the gap we have a yarn over and stitch pair. So that's what we're going to work up to. And then we're not going to work the yarn over and stitch pair. We're going to leave those unworked and we're going to turn. Okay, now let's look at it with the yarn in the right hand again because I want to cover the yarn over on the purl side. So see, your yarn's in the front because you've finished a knit row and turned around, and that's where your yarn is. So to do the yarn over, you bring it up over the top of the needle and then to the front again between the needles so that you can purl. So you see what I did? It's in the front, I went over the top of the working needle, and then I bring it to the front again, so it goes all the way around, creates that extra stitch. Now I can't even begin to purl with the yarn in my right hand, so I'm going to take it that if you know how to knit with your yarn held in your right hand, you know how to make a purl stitch now. But I wanted to show you how to do the yarn over. If you're working with the yarn in your left hand, the yarn over, you just flip it over the needle like that. Same thing as on the knit side. It's almost magic the way the yarn goes to the front or the back as you need it when you hold the yarn in your left hand. So at any rate, we're going to purl now. And again, we're going to purl up to that first yarn over and stitch pair. So I can go pretty far across now because I know that I'm working at the beginning of the heel, so I have a lot of stitches in between my yarn overs and stitch pairs. As I get closer and closer together, I'll have to be watching sooner. So again, here's our stitch that we left unworked, then the gap, then the yarn over and stitch pair. So I go up to that and I turn. And I just keep going back and forth like that. I go up to the yarn over and stitch pair. I turn, I make a yarn over, and I knit and purl, knit or purl, whatever is necessary, whether I'm on a knit row or a purl row, to the yarn over and stitch pair. So I'm always going up to that yarn over and stitch pair. And I'm going to continue going back and forth in this fashion until there's about 8 stitches left in the middle, or 1/3 of what I started with on the heel. So here you can see stitches I left unworked before are over here with gaps, and then yarn over and stitch pair. So that's where I'm going to turn. So you can go ahead and continue working back and forth these 2 rows where you knit and purl with the yarn over at the beginning of the row and stop at the first yarn over and stitch pair you come to until you have about 1/3 of your stitches left.